hidden. Not in a vault, not behind a locked door, not buried beneath a collapsed empire, hidden in plain sight, in the gestures people make without knowing why, in the words spoken at birth and at death that have not changed in 3,000 years, in the symbols drawn on walls and doorposts and the bodies of the living, by hands that learned them from hands that learned them from hands, going back further than any written record can follow. Africa has been keeping secrets, not the secrets of failure or shame, the secrets of knowledge so deep, so carefully preserved, that the people who carried it decided the only safe place to keep it was inside the living, inside the rituals, inside the traditions, inside the things that look to the outside world like culture, but are, in truth, something far older than culture. This is the untold mystery of Africa's sacred traditions, and by the end of this video, you will never look at a ritual the same way again. Before the first empire rose on African soil, before the first river was named, before the first word was pressed into clay or carved into stone, there was a system for understanding the world. Not just the visible world, the world beneath the visible, the world that moves through living things and does not stop when the body does. African civilizations from the Nile Valley to the Niger Delta, from the Great Lakes to the edge of the Kalahari, were not simply building cities and forging iron and trading across vast distances. They were also answering a question, the question every human civilization eventually asks. What is this? What are we inside of? What holds everything together, and what happens when it lets go? And the answers they arrived at, through thousands of years of observation, ritual, and careful transmission, were not simple. They were not primitive. They were, and I say this with full weight, among the most sophisticated frameworks for understanding human existence that any civilization has ever produced, and most of the world has never heard them properly told. Until now. The first mystery. And it begins with a question that sounds simple. Until you sit with it, why do symbols survive when empires don't? Empires fall. Languages change. Royal lineages are interrupted, but across ancient Africa, in the Nsibidi script of the Cross River, in the Adinkra symbols of the Akan, in the Ulai patterns of the Igbo, in the Medu Neter of ancient Egypt, symbols survived. Not because they were preserved in museums, but because they were used, written on skin, woven into cloth, pressed into the walls of homes, carried by the living. Now, here's what most people do not know about these symbols. According to the oral traditions of the Ekpe Society, one of the oldest cross-cultural fraternal organizations in West and Central Africa, Nsibidi script was not invented. It was received. It is believed, according to these traditions, that the original symbols were revealed to the founding elders of the Ekpe Society in a state between waking and sleep, a state that the tradition specifically calls the place where the seen world and the unseen world become the same place. Now, you can interpret that however you choose. What you cannot dismiss is what happened after. Because those symbols allegedly received, not invented, were kept secret for centuries. Only initiated members of the Ekpe Society were allowed to read them. Only initiated members were allowed to write them. And within those symbols, hidden in plain sight, in the lines and curves that outsiders passed every day without reading, was a complete system of law, of spiritual knowledge, of social organization. An entire civilization's worth of knowledge, carried in marks that looked, to the uninitiated, like decoration. The first mystery of Africa's sacred traditions is this. Some of what was hidden inside what was visible. Not buried, not locked away, hidden in the open, because the people who needed to find it would know how to look. The second mystery. And this one is harder to explain away, because it is not about the past. It is about something that is still happening, right now. Today, the Egungun masquerade of the Yoruba people. For those who don't know, the Egungun is the physical manifestation of the ancestor, not a representation, not a symbol. According to Yoruba spiritual tradition, when the Egungun appears, the ancestor is present. The cloth, the mask, the movement, these are not performance. They are the form the ancestor uses to cross back. Now, here is what makes this a mystery rather than simply a tradition. The Egungun masquerade has been documented by missionaries, by colonial administrators, by ethnographers for over 300 years. 300 years of attempts to suppress it, to ban it, to replace it. In some regions, the practice was driven underground. In some communities, the masks were seized, the costumes burned. In some families, the knowledge of how to call the ancestor correctly was reduced to one person, one elder, who carried it alone. And yet, the Egungun did not disappear. It is still here, still being practiced in Nigeria, in Benin, in Brazil and Cuba, in the Caribbean, carried across the Atlantic in the bodies and memories of enslaved people, surviving the Middle Passage, surviving 3 centuries of systematic destruction, and emerging on the other side, still recognizable, still calling the same ancestors, still using the same patterns of cloth and movement and sound. That is not stubbornness. That is not cultural nostalgia. That is a transmission so deeply rooted in people that nothing in 300 years of effort was able to cut it out. What kind of knowledge survives that? What does it take, what depth of truth to make something undestroyable? The third mystery, and this one is the one that tends to make people genuinely uncomfortable, because it involves a word that was used for centuries to dismiss African knowledge. That word is primitive. The Borana people of Ethiopia and Kenya have maintained an oral astronomical calendar for, according to their own tradition, thousands of years. A calendar based entirely on the observation of 7 specific stars and their relationships to the phases of the moon. A calendar that requires no instruments, no writing, no technology beyond the human eye and the human memory. Ethnographers who studied this calendar in the 20th century found something that stopped them completely. The Borana calendar is, in terms of its accuracy for tracking time and predicting celestial events, functionally equivalent to several early written calendars from other ancient civilizations. Without writing, without instruments, carried entirely in the human mind, passed from one generation to the next through oral transmission. That is not primitive. That is a different technology, a technology that runs on human beings instead of paper, on memory instead of stone. And here is the deeper mystery, because it is not just that the Borana had an accurate calendar, it is why they needed one. The calendar was not primarily for farming. It was not primarily for navigation. According to oral tradition, the calendar was developed first and kept alive longest for a single purpose: to know when the ancestors were closest, to know which nights, in which seasons, in which configurations of specific stars. The distance between the living and the dead was thinnest, and the communication between them was most clear. They built their most sophisticated system of knowledge around listening. For the people who had already gone, was that superstition? Or was it the most serious scientific project a civilization could undertake? Now, here is the part of the story that changes everything. The part most documentaries and history books miss entirely, because they look at African sacred traditions from the outside. They see the mask, the ritual, the symbol, the ceremony, and they ask, what does it mean? But here is what the inside of the tradition knows that the outside never sees. Every sacred tradition in ancient Africa had 2 layers: what was shown and what was carried. What was shown was for the community, for the ceremony, for the public ritual, for the procession through the village. What was carried was transmitted only between the initiated, only in private, only to those who had proven themselves ready to hold it. The Ekpe society sealed its deepest knowledge inside a script that looked decorative. The Egungun society passed its most sacred instructions orally, never written, never performed publicly. The Borana astronomers divided their calendar knowledge into what was shared with the community, and what was known only by the specific lineage of calendar keepers. The tradition, in other words, was also a container. And what was inside the container was not the ritual. The ritual was the lid. What was inside was the knowledge of why the ritual worked, why the symbol carried power, why the calendar mattered, the deep structure, the operating system beneath the ceremony. And here is the part that should make you stop and think. Most of that inner layer was never written down. By design, it was kept oral, kept embodied, kept in the relationship between one person and the next. Because the keepers of these traditions understood something that the modern world is only beginning to rediscover. Some knowledge changes when you write it down. When it lives in a book, anyone can read it. But when it lives in a person, it arrives with everything the person is: their life, their sacrifice, their judgment. The tradition was not just preserving information. It was preserving the quality of the person who carried it. If 3 different African civilizations across completely different regions, completely different languages, completely different historical periods, each developed a system for keeping sacred knowledge alive inside people rather than objects, what were they all understanding? What had they each observed about the nature of knowledge, about the nature of the sacred, about the nature of what survives and what doesn't, that led them all to the same conclusion? That the most important things cannot be written, that they can only be lived. And here is the question that follows from that. If the deepest knowledge was kept inside people, and those people were taken, scattered across the Atlantic, separated from their communities, their languages, their elders, how much did they carry with them? And how much of what they carried is still alive, in the gestures, in the rhythms, in the things people do without knowing why, because it lives in them below the level of memory? I don't think we have even begun to understand what survived. I want you to answer something in the comments, not for the algorithm, for yourself. Is there something you do, a gesture, a practice, a way of marking the important moments of your life that you learned without being taught? That arrived in you as if it had always been there. Leave it below, because I believe the answers in this comments section are going to be a kind of record, a map of what survived. Here is what I believe. After sitting with these stories, after reading the oral traditions, the ethnographies, the accounts of the keepers themselves, Africa's sacred traditions were never primitive. They were never superstition. They were never the thinking of people who did not know better. They were, and they remain, one of the most sophisticated systems of knowledge transmission that any civilization has ever built. Not because of the symbols, not because of the rituals, not even because of the wisdom they carried, though that wisdom was and is extraordinary, but because of what their survival tells us, about what human beings are capable of protecting, about how deep a truth has to live inside a person before it becomes undestroyable. These traditions survived 300 years of active suppression. They survived the Atlantic. They survived colonial prohibition. They survived the pressure still ongoing in many communities to abandon them as backward, as old, as something to be ashamed of. And they are still here, in the symbols, in the masquerades, in the calendars, in the elders' hands drawing a mark on a wall that has been drawn for 3,000 years, in the young person learning it now. The mystery is not why these traditions existed. The mystery, the real mystery, is how they survived. And the answer, I think, is simpler than we expect. They survived because the people who carried them believed, with everything they had, that what they were protecting was worth more than their own safety, worth more than their own comfort, worth more than what the world thought of them for carrying it. That is not primitive. That is the deepest form of love a civilization can practice, protecting the truth for people you will never meet. If this video made you feel the weight of what was preserved and the cost of that preservation, then you already understand why this channel exists. Ancient African history is not here to give you a history lesson. It is here to give you back something that was always yours. Stories that survived because someone, somewhere, believed you deserved to hear them. Subscribe and ring the bell, because the next story we are uncovering is about a woman whose name was deliberately removed from every written record, but who, according to oral tradition, changed the political structure of an entire continent. And the people who erased her name could not erase what she built. Not lost, not forgotten, hidden, and waiting for you.